Again, and please, the floor is yours. Georgia and about Georgia's defense and security issues.
We'd like to also say, seeing President Mark Velashvili reminded me of my first visit to Georgia in 2013 when I had the privilege to meet him there. And I asked kind of a silly tourist question, but I had the president right in front of me. Us extremely vulnerable, and it makes everything that much more difficult. So I would encourage all my friends there in Tbilisi to do everything you can to help protect that trust, earn that trust from your population. I'm not naive, but this helps. This is an important aspect of resilience. I had the privilege to visit Kyiv this past week. I was there with a delegation of 5 former U.S. ambassadors. You'll know some of these guys, Ambassador Bershkow, Herbst. Ground for what's going on there. We met with several different members of the RADA from different parties, as well as the speaker of the RADA. We met with several different ministers, and I had an hour with President Zelensky. I came away from this meeting and from our visit, first of all, impressed with the fighting spirit of Ukrainians. This is not 2014. They are prepared mentally, psychologically, very determined. President Zelensky impressed me. He is not confused about the threat. There has, of course, been some disagreements between Washington and Kyiv about how the threat is perceived, how the Russian threat will manifest itself. Is it going to be a massive assault all at one time, or is it going to be something that looks more like what they've been doing, actually, since 2008? And President Zelensky has the very difficult task of helping make sure his country is prepared for what I think is almost inevitable. It's not inevitable, but it's almost inevitable, certainly increasingly likely, a new offensive by Russian forces into Ukraine. But he has to be prepared for that. But at the same time, his economy is getting crushed. And they're having to use up reserves just to keep their currency afloat. This is not a surprise to the Kremlin. In fact, I think much of what the Kremlin is trying to do now by deploying all these soldiers on Ukraine's border, in addition to the 30,000 plus that are already in Crimea and in Donbass, is to do exactly that, to put so much pressure on Ukraine that the economy suffers. And then the Kremlin will have achieved one of its principal strategic objectives, is to present Ukraine as a failed state and for the government to collapse. This is part of their aim. And interestingly, my flight Tuesday morning from Kyiv back to home to Frankfurt was a Lufthansa flight. During the middle of the night, the departure time moved up an hour and a half. So you can imagine I was hustling when I did wake up to get to the airport on time to catch the flight home to Frankfurt. And this is because Lufthansa and several other airlines are beginning to curtail their flights in and out of Ukraine, to curtail the amount of time that they're actually sitting on the ground. So this pressure from Russia is affecting even the airlines. So this is the challenge that the president has. How do you maintain calm? And by the way, the head of the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine told me that several American companies were asking him, should we pull our people out? And of course, you know, the U.S. Embassy sent families home, and several other embassies did that. So what incredible pressure on the president of Ukraine. And so here, this kind of resiliency that Carl was talking about requires leadership that is able to convince the population we are doing everything that's necessary. We're doing everything we can. We have friends coming in. There were 3 prime ministers in Kyiv just yesterday. And I think today President Erdogan is visiting in Kyiv. We had a large congressional delegation last week. So these things are helpful. And the endless flow of aircraft bringing in weapons and ammunition and other necessary supplies, this is part of it. But he's got to also do it in a way that businesses keep going, that airlines keep flying. What a challenge. And of course, everybody in Tbilisi is connected, well, there too, but in Kyiv is connected to the internet. And so I encourage my Ukrainian friends, you have to be proactive. If you want to protect your internet, you have to be proactive. You can't just tell people, make sure you're using the right passwords and that you're doing normal things. You have to be proactive. The RADA is not on a government website. It's separate, just like the parliament in most countries would be in a separate entity than would be the actual government itself. And of course, they are getting hit. Pressure from refugees. If and when Russia launches a new offensive into Ukraine, there are probably going to be tens of thousands of refugees heading west, not just in western Ukraine, but probably on into Poland, into Slovakia, into Hungary. And this is going to create massive pressure on those governments and on the European Union. Now, again, this will not be a surprise to the Kremlin. Their support for the Assad regime put over 3 million refugees on the road into Turkey and into Europe back in 2015. We all saw the manufactured crisis of refugees from Belarus pushing against the borders of Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland, creating massive pressure on populations and going after the unity of the alliance, but also the European Union. And I anticipate that this is also going to be one of the challenges if Russia invades again or expands what they're already doing. Let me close with this. Carl mentioned Germany. Germany is the key in all of this. Germany is the key because of its moral authority, because of its economic power, and because of its geography, its leadership inside the European Union. And of course, with a new coalition government, it's important for the United States to understand the domestic political situation in Germany, where the chancellor, no matter what he or she may ever want to do, in this case, Chancellor Scholz, it's still a coalition government. And so I think as the United States works with our essential ally, Germany, on encouraging German support, recognizing and understanding the nature of a coalition government will be important here. I will say that the Green Party has been tougher on Russia than I would have ever imagined in my life. The 3 strongest voices coming out of Berlin, of course, are Mr. Habeck, Ms. Baerbock, and Mr. Omid Noripur, who have been resolute about Russia's and China's human rights violations, as well as the use of gas as a weapon. And fortunately, here in the last few days, I have seen some movement by the SPD, the ruling party within the coalition, the leading party, that acknowledging publicly that yes, Russia is the aggressor, and yes, everything is on the table. With that, I'm very grateful for the chance to talk to you this morning, and I look forward to questions also and challenges.
General, thank you very much. Yes, you mentioned trust towards media, trust towards government, trust towards all the major actors who are going to be the suppliers of security and